Hi, everybody. If you're a web developer or know someone who is, there's a very good chance you've heard of CSS Battle. CSS Battle takes the age-old idea of code golfing, where you have to solve a programming problem by using as few characters as possible, and it takes it to the world of CSS. It's educational, it's very fun, and it's also very addictive. And so let's go behind the scenes and take a look at what makes CSS Battle work, how did it get started, how did it go from a side project to being wildly successful. So to answer these questions and more, we're going to talk to one of the creators of CSS Battle, Kushagra Gour. So sit back, relax, grab a drink. This is going to be fun. It's going to be informative. So let's get started. All right. Hi, Kushagra. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing, Kiripa?
Good, good, good. No, living the dream, like I like to say. So before we go too far, could you just tell me a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So by profession, I'm a front-end developer. I lead the front-end team at a company called Kushagra here in India. But I like to call myself a creative person because I like doing creative stuff, like whatever it be, like creating side projects, making games. I've been making games ever since I started coding, making music on piano or maybe sketching stuff, like every creative stuff out there. I like to do it. So yeah, that's like a short summary of me.
So you mentioned you're a developer, and I like to ask this all the time. What's the first thing you ever remembered coding?
Hmm. Well, of course, like you have, so in school they teach coding. They used to see, like, used to teach, and even now. So that's of course was there. They used to teach. I think they start with C in school. So that's of course like we were learning, and I was coding programs. But like the first thing that I actually created myself at home while learning all this stuff was actually a game in C. And I remember in school they didn't teach graphics. All there was like data structures and few algorithms and basic programming. But then I on my own learned how to program graphics in C, and then I built a game. If you know, there's a very famous game out here called Kon Nega Crorepati. It comes on TV. So I made a clone of that in C, and I was so thrilled and so like shocked to see it working in front of me. I was running around my house distributing like sweets to everyone I could find. That's how you like celebrate when you do something. So yeah, that's something I always remember.
Creating graphics in C is like not the easiest thing because it's pretty a low level language. Do you remember using a graphics library for that, or were you just actually calling native APIs on the OS directly?
Oh, all native APIs, like just import graphic.h. I think that was the header like library. And yeah, drawing lines and circles, animating them with set timeout. It was like crazy.
At some point, if you ever have an archive that somewhere, you should share it just so that, people are like, oh, this is like, you're doing front end web work now. But back then it was all like, C and those kind of things.
Right, right. I'm sure I have it somewhere in my old computer.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. It's always fun to see like where everyone begins, as part of becoming, all interested in this world of technology and programming and so on. So speaking of which, CSS Battle, it's probably one of the more addictive sites. I'm not an active player, but I do watch the leaderboards. I see the challenges that come across. So tell me more about what was the idea behind CSS Battle? How did you get started?
Well, CSS, the language has been very close to me ever since I started diving into front-end development because it's something which is at the intersection of programming and visual design, right? And that's where creativity lies. You can program stuff visually to make stuff like games, for example. So CSS is something I have always loved working with, diving deep, understanding the concept. It's also a weird language, as we know. So it's always fun to understand the unique concepts that language has. So yeah, the love for CSS had always been there. And as a front-end developer, you would like know that a life of a front-end developer mostly uh, is about getting a design pixels and then converting it with HTML and CSS into a functional stuff. So that always was there at the back of my mind, and that this is something we do. So like just out of that usual process that we used to follow at day job, I always thought like, why not transform this into a game where you get like simple images and you write CSS. That's what I love as a language. You just use CSS and build that image, And later, like while working and more thinking about the idea how to make it more fun, that's where the code golfing came in into that. So yeah, like I maintain a long list of projects that I want to do. I don't get time to like chance to work on all of those, but this is one of the thing that was on my top of my list. And it had been there for like 4 5 years until I actually got time to start this project. And yeah, that's how like it was incubated.
Did you ever, play the JavaScript challenges that were very similar back in the day, where you had like a challenge and you had to create it in like the least amount of characters possible? Was that something that you ever participated in?
Yeah, actually, like code golfing is something I came to know through JavaScript, because code golfing in JavaScript has been like since like many years. People like actually there's a huge community out there doing golfing and creating such amazing things you can't like even imagine can be created in few bytes of JS. So that's something I always watched. I've always tried to learn. I'm nowhere like near golfing JavaScript like these people do, but has always been an inspiration and always like amazed me. I used to like try out few things like learning Java generative things, how to do those with JavaScript, and creating graphics with just like simple sine and cos and those loops and all things. So yeah, that's how I got introduced to golfing, and I like thought like why not mix it with CSS. There was nothing out there for CSS in terms of golfing. So this was something like a very unique thing that I had to bring out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm probably deviating too far here, but speaking of code golfing, since you mentioned you did some graphics in C, there were some examples back in the day, I want to say probably like 10, 15 years ago, of like probably C or C++ apps where it's only about 10, 20 lines of code, but it used some like native library that's on like, I guess, a Windows machine that allowed you to create these like very 3D visualizations of like, like geometric shapes that were not just shapes, but actually like connected with like various lines and planes to create this really,
Yeah.
almost like psychedelic effects. I know, almost like a Winamp skin, but just more with like just 20, 30 lines of code. So that's what it kind of reminded me of. Do you remember those by any chance, or am I just
Yeah,
like
yeah, definitely.
cool?
Those were
So
really cool. Like, yeah.
so getting back to CSS Battle a bit more on it. So what were your first couple of days like? So you built it. You had an idea of like you want to bring the code golfing idea to CSS. So so you
Mhm.
launched it. So what were your next steps from there? How did you go from just launching it to getting the first people to use it?
Right. Yeah, so the initial days were very crazy, like the actual development. So CSS Battle is made by me and a friend of mine, which just like happened to be the same name, Kushagra. We call it like Kushagra and Kushagra, making CSS Battle. So yeah, like I always had this idea when I actually sat down, like, okay, this is something I'm gonna build. Uh, I contacted Kushagra, like asked him, like, do you wanna work on this? And of course he agreed. He's also a CSS freak, just like me. Of course, he agreed to that. And we set a benchmark for us, like 1 month is something we're gonna work on this. Whatever we can build in that time, that is what we launch. We're just not gonna drag it forever. So yeah, worked on it, got to a decent state, and the idea was that once we have a good playable version, we'll send it out to few people. So we just like got we created a contact list of people like Leah Verus, Jonathan Snook, and everyone we could find in the CSS community. And we mailed them this initial version, asked them just to play it, try out what do you feel, and like give us feedback. So that's what our launch was. Technically, we didn't do anything apart from this. And it so happened like everyone I don't remember like someone like not liking this. Like everyone we send out the mail to, they actually got addicted. It was not like just like fun, but it was kind of addiction for them, and they played all night. They were. I remember Leah tweeting out that I had to cancel a meeting with my friend because I'm playing CSS Battle, and it was so addictive. And so yeah, I mean, people liked it. Jonathan Snoop was the first person. I think he just tweeted it out, and it went like crazy in the community. Everyone was like playing it. That's how we like started getting our initial users after the people who we sent mail to. Yeah, I mean, people played, and the initial I would say the the thing that got more people into this, it was just the tweets that people were making about their addiction. This is so addictive, I can't do this. This is so addictive, I have taken work from home just to play this from my home. So these were the tweets that just got us the initial users organically. That's how it went.
So I'm assuming that the goals you had for your first 30 days, 100 days, and so on, you wildly exceeded them very quickly.
Oh no, no, like it was far away from my expectations. Like it went crazy. We were like shocked every day to see like what kind of things people were doing. That was also like really shocking. I mean, very soon we had like people who were breaking records one after the another. So that was one thing that kept shocking us. For like it still shocks us like what people can do with such little code in CSS. And of course like the level of addiction that we anticipated, because we were also playing amongst ourselves, but then it got to a whole new level. It was crazy.
Yeah, no, that's actually great to hear because, one of the things that I've always found in like, successful products like this is that in many ways, there's a problem that you personally had. Like you wanted to build something that would, because you enjoyed code golfing, and you wanted to build this really for yourself. And so in some ways, it would be fair to say that you were like your first customer. And we were like, and if I can feel like this is a good product, there's a good chance others will like it as well. Is that a fair assessment?
True, very true. Like that's been my motive always with everything I build. It's they're mostly I would say like always there's something which solve my problem. That of course like has an advantage that I would be solving my problem, so I build something which actually solves the problem. And the second benefit that you get out of it, if you release it, if you happen to release it in public and nobody in the world gives a shit about it and uses it, you would at least use that product, right? You won't be disappointed. So yeah, that's always something I follow. It's true.
No, that is great to see. So when did you figure out that you had a hit product? Like, at what point were you like, okay, this is not just like one of my many hobbies that I proved out, it's valid, it's good, but it is actually something much bigger than what I'd ever imagined.
Right. Yeah. So like in my mind when I had this, like theoretically it sounded cool. That's why I like actually pursued it. But there was a point when we had a very basic functional thing going on. It was not pretty. It was all like messed up visually. But then you had an image, you could write code, submit it, get a score. That's all was there in the product. And I remember me and Kushagra, we used to play during the nights while working. Like we're just working, implementing some feature, and then we used to randomly play on a particular level. And his message used to come that I just beat your score by one character. And that's a very big motivation in this game. Like when somebody beats your record, you tend to like think on a whole new level. I don't know why, but when somebody beats your record, you tend to like you have more chances of beating it again. So I used to like get on it. Like I used to stop working on the game itself and I used to play it until I used to beat his record. Then I used to message him, hey, take this. I beat your record again. So this to and fro used to go on for long hours, and we used to enjoy so much while developing the game. We used to play it and enjoy so much. I think that's when we realized like this is gonna be addictive. Like I can't stop playing it myself while building it, and I mean, yeah, just that thing which was going on. I kind of anticipated this. Like at least people would like it.
Yeah. And so you mentioned scoring. So how does scoring exactly work? Is it just based on characters? Or is it both characters and output, like making sure that output matches what the initial challenge is?
Right. So, in very short definition, is like you first get some scoring based on the match percentage. So, as the more matching you have, the more score you get up to a certain level. Once you have 100% match, the only way to increase your score is by reducing the characters. So both the parameters get taken into account. And like talking about scoring, like the scoring algorithm itself, that was like the most craziest part of developing this game. I remember like so it involves a lot of math. We didn't anticipate it. It seemed like a normal thing, like we'll just have a formula that has two parameters, two variables, and it gives you a number. But then it got a lot complicated for some reason. I vaguely remember now, but that's something we spent a lot of days figuring out. There were issues like two people getting same score even though their character counts were different, and all those uh, weird issues. Yeah.
Yeah, no, these are the kind of the growing pains that you often get as you get more people using it. And so, for the matching itself, is it a case where like are you taking just a screen capture of that region and just like, overlaying it on top and seeing how it works? Or how does that, approximately, work in your case?
The image, the code that people submit, that's actually used to generate an image first of all.
Okay.
So we get one image out of the user's code, and then of course we have one image that was being used to like as a reference, right? The target image. So once we have these two images, we actually do mixed pixel matching, which is like 1-to-1 pixel matching. That gives us a percentage of pixels that are matching. But then there's a few quirks here and there that are also taken into account. For example, the biggest one is anti-aliasing. So we need
Yes.
to also consider about anti-aliasing, because otherwise, like there's hardly an image that can be replicated 100%. So
Correct.
that was something also which was tricky, because there are a few parameters that we had to tweak just to the right amount, so that it's not very trivial to just uh, approximate the image, and it's also not very difficult to have it like match pixel by pixel even on the borders of things. So yeah, but that's how it works.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. I was always curious to know, like, exactly, because it is a hard problem. What you mentioned. It's like a classic problem of like, how do you overlay two images? There's transparency involved. Independent of anti-aliasing. How does that work? I think a lot of the examples you have were more solid colors where there wasn't much transparency. But I can totally imagine at one point when you do come up with a challenge where that is involved, you're gonna go to a lot of fun places, especially because a lot of our browsers deal with transparency very differently. So it's almost like what I might see and what you see in the background might be very, very different. But that's really, really, really cool.
Yeah. Anti-aliasing is also, in fact, like one of the things that we need to keep in mind while building these target images. So there are a few guidelines that we have made for ourselves that generate images which are like it makes sure that they are technically possible to create with CSS, with code basically. So anti-aliasing uh, creeps in a lot when you have these very sharp cusps, or two colors which are very like in contrast, overlapping each other. So we need to also like keep those things in mind to avoid such issues coming in targets.
Are there any limits to like what kind of CSS people can provide, or is pretty much anything that runs in the browser totally valid?
Yeah, so basically anything that browser can interpret and render, can pass and render. But there's like one thing different than what we usually I mean write as CSS in the browser, is that in CSS Battle you don't get a doc type. So because of that, the code that gets rendered is without a doc type, and you get offered a lot of quirks with along with that. So browser without a doc type doesn't need a closing style type, for example. So that basically gives you a lot of opportunities to golf your code more and reduce characters, and basically ignore all these unnecessities like the closing style tag, the units after lot of numbers, like margins can be straight away written as 13, 14, 15. You don't have to put pixels.
Yeah.
So doc type is a big thing that affects how people actually golf in CSS Battle.
Okay. So, but can I also put JavaScript in there? Not that I would, because that probably bloats the character count. Or are you limiting it
Mhm.
to only rendering whatever goes within the style tag, which would make the JavaScript not work?
No, it's totally restricted. Like even if you write, like it won't get executed. So our rendering environment like makes sure that no external assets can be loaded. So even if you put an
Okay.
image tag with some SRC, no assets are required. Network is closed basically. The JavaScript execution has been stopped in that environment, and yeah, all those things are restricted. It's like just CSS and HTML, of course.
Nice, nice. And where I'm also kind of going with this also is that you might have seen like CSS Houdini, where you can do a lot more programmatic things within CSS. Is that something that is supported, or is it something that, because of the way you have to, right now at least, enable Houdini capabilities, it wouldn't be something you can use?
Well, not right now. I don't have like practical experience with that, but I am guessing like you can write. You first have to write some JavaScript to enable a particular CSS, something like new custom CSS properties and all those things, like paintlets and all. So since JavaScript is disabled, you basically can't get into Houdini, or I don't see uh, opportunity for Houdini getting integrated in CSS Battle.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, because I can totally imagine some things can be very, very easy to do at some point, because you have a lot more primitive capabilities you can do, as opposed for like more complicated shapes than you might just do using raw CSS. So, oh yeah, that's actually really, that makes a lot of sense.
In fact, talking about restrictions, I remember one thing that like uh, got us crazy for weeks. So initially, after all the restrictions that we had in place, we still allowed SVG to be written in the code, right? Because it's HTML, it's valid HTML. It's not CSS though, but HTML was allowed. So SVG was something people were using to build, like to solve a lot of things. And since SVG gives you a lot of exclusive capabilities, some targets were like written with half the amount of SVG characters compared to CSS.
Yeah.
So that started a whole new debate. Like people were finding out that SVGs are allowed in this, and there was one type of people who were saying like SVG is not CSS. Others were saying like SVG is still HTML and it's about HTML and CSS. So why shouldn't it be allowed? It was a like battle going on, a different battle sort of going on in the community. And we finally took a decision that okay, SVG is not what we want people to write while creating these targets. We solely want to focus on CSS, and then we decided to like restrict SVG also. And again, like it came in with the decision came in with a lot of things. Like we had to adjust all the past scores that players had
Yeah.
with SVG, passing those and fixing those. So yeah, that was fun.
Speaking of that, what are your thoughts on like base 64 encoded images that basically, take a GIF, encode it, and just make it, I guess, like your background image source, or content source?
Right. That actually works, I think. I'm not 100% sure, but in most cases, certainly like all cases, even if you are able to base 64 a particular target and put it in, you would have a lot of characters.
Yeah.
So you will get 100% match, but then the code golfing aspect just goes in the dustbin with base 64.
Yeah, no, I assume so much, but I was just, trying to see like what are some tricks that people might have tried to at least get the match first. So that makes that. Do you collect statistics essentially on like what properties people are using the most, how many people are using, like let's say base 64, for example? Like, do you have like data like that? You just, you don't share, but you just are like, this is kind of cool. I never expected these things or these properties to be used quite frequently.
Well, we don't have numbers as such. We would love to have them someday. Probably have them publicly on the website. Some people have even suggested like why not have a stats page where you show the most used property on CSS Battle and so on. So yeah, that's something we want to, but right now we don't. But we occasionally like for auditing purpose and sometimes for checking plagiarism and all those things, we do like look at few solutions of the top players, and every time we see such solutions, they like completely blow our mind. Most of the time it's very hard to like decipher those codes. It's very difficult to understand like how a particular like 3-4 lines of code can actually build that target image, which is like a whole complex shapes on top of each other. So that generally gives us a lot of insight into new things that are out there, but people don't generally use them in like production world apps. So that's something we learn occasionally. And also like the usual properties that we use, there are so many different ways in which they can be used, and so many different ways in what they can output. That's also something we often come across while seeing these solutions. So it's an amazing experience, like a learning experience whenever we check out these solutions. And like it's not just like we checking the solutions. So we sometime back we also brought in a concept called open targets. So open targets are basically levels in which all the top solutions are open. So of course, like everyone can go on these open targets and see the solution that the top players are using to get such low, high scores and low code. So those are also like eye opening, like what can be done with CSS.
Yeah, and so speaking of the CSS approaches people are using, what version of like the CSS spec or browser version do you enforce? Like someone on Chrome Canary, for example, might have access to more CSS properties and capabilities
Right.
than someone might be on like Chrome Stable. I think like for example, like the most recent example is like the has selector, which like people on Canary had, but regular ones did not. Not that you would use it because it's verbose, but do you have like a pinned version that you expect everyone to code against?
So the general rule is like we want to stay on the latest stable Chromium out there, but like we don't have an automated process to have it updated automatically as soon as Chromium lands up. But yeah, the stable version is what we ideally want the people to play on. And of course, like as you said, like some people uh, do play CSS Battle on Canary, and often they forget that they are on Canary and the system is on a stable version. They tend to use a property which is not out there, and they come back to us like saying, "Hey, my solution is 100% on my side, but it's not giving me a better score." So we just like remind them, "Okay, please don't play on Canary. Get on the stable version to play."
Yeah, or just have them wait a month until that becomes stable, and then they can
Yeah.
submit it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that has happened a lot. Like CSS recently, I don't know, has gone a lot of, I would say, breaking changes kind of things have come recently. So whenever we actually like get on the next stable version and people have been waiting for so long, it's actually a kind of celebration. People actually wait. Okay, this is the day the stable version is gonna land up in CSS Battle,
Yes,
and right when it comes, we're going to submit our new solutions to get the amazing scores. Just for example, like the transform, the individual properties like translate, rotate recently landed up in Chrome, and people were really excited about it. Like I'll just go back to all my 100 previous solutions, remove all the transform, and change it to translate. So yeah, it's
exactly.
fun. It has been like disasters also. For example, so one weird quirk that people found out in CSS is CSS variables, the custom properties. You can actually create a custom property with no name. So hyphen hyphen nothing. You can just put a value after it. It was like used a lot when people found it out that saved a lot of characters. But then recently Chromium stopped accepting a variable, a custom property without a name. So everything out there which had this thing stopped rendering in Chrome. It stopped like working. So people had to change their solutions. Yeah, all weird things keep happening.
On one hand, though, I think it's extremely exciting that you built something that people love so much that they actually wait until a new version of Chromium is updated on CSS Battle. The moment it happens, they actually update it because when you think about it, everyone's days are busy. They have like a billion things they're doing that they're able to spend that much time mentally and physically to do something on it. It's just another, testament to like having built a product that people love.
Yeah, totally. Like I still like it has been over 3 years, and I still feel so amazed seeing the level of addiction that people have for CSS Battle. There are people playing it every day for hours and breaking records every day, especially the top players like on CSS Battle. Yeah, I can't like imagine devoting so much time to a game myself.
Yeah, but the nice thing is that as part of it, I'm almost certain that they're also learning new techniques in CSS that they can use in more real-world scenarios as well. So I think there's like a practical application to this.
Yeah, definitely. Like, of course, the gamification brings in that addiction and inner desire to keep beating the score because there are other strong players out there. So you want to get on the top of the leaderboard. That's of course there, but if you see like all these top players, they like apart from getting on the top of the leaderboard, it's the learning part. It's the pushing the boundaries thing that like keeps them hooked to the game. They want to see like how they can twist the properties they have been using all their life to create something which is like totally different and totally unimaginable. So I think that's one of the factors which keeps people hooked to this, code golfing aspect of the game.
Yeah, no, I think that's actually, really pretty exciting overall that, you're able to do all of this. And so, that segues nicely to my next question on gamification is you recently launched Learn, a way of teaching people CSS in a more interactive, fun way. So what was the thinking behind, your approach there?
Yeah. So, of course, CSS Battle started out with just a game, a concept of a game where you would write code to code golf and create images. It started out with that, but there has been a lot of learnings, seeing people play it, seeing people seeing how they play it, what kind of things they do on CSS Battle, for what motives they play on CSS Battle. So one thing that we realized, an important thing was we designed it as a game where you can code golf and get on the top of leaderboard. Ideally, like that's what our intention was. Like people would play to get on the top of leaderboard. But we realized we actually did a poll also which confirmed this. But we realized that a lot of people, majority of them in fact, play CSS Battle to improve their CSS skills and gain more confidence. Because when you are, it's a repetition kind of thing. When you repeatedly are able to do something, it brings in confidence inside you that okay, I can use CSS, all the properties out there in CSS, I can use them to do whatever you shoot at me, right? So that's something like people have been finding CSS Battle helpful for. It gives them confidence and gives them like it's sort of a practice playground for them for improving their CSS. So that realization basically like over the time we started like thinking about like why not have CSS Battle as the place where you can just have fun with CSS and do everything that you can with CSS. We ideally want someone to come to CSS Battle to learn CSS. We want them to practice their whatever they learn, the knowledge they got. They should ideally be able to practice it and improve it, further evolve it. We want them to like read, like in the future possibly we want them to read articles about CSS and know everything that's coming, latest trendy stuff about CSS on CSS Battle. So ideally like this is something like we want CSS Battle to evolve into a place where you can do everything about CSS. So so coming back to the point, the learn thing. So when we realized like people actually use it to practice CSS, we thought like why not give them a starting point where even like people who don't know about CSS, uh, they have been few instances where people have tweeted like this looks like such an amazing game, looks so interesting, but I don't know CSS. I want to learn CSS just to play this game, and such instances like enforced us like uh, we have a strong community, we have a good place where people are playing. uh, we should ideally give them something where they can first learn CSS, get to know everything, and then of course for practicing, for improving that, they can get into the game aspect of CSS. So that's how learn came into. We spent a good 2 years. We talked about it like in the community. Okay, this is something we're coming up with, and it's a very difficult thing to build. We realized building a game that teaches you is not a straightforward problem. We realized, and it took a long 2 years, but yeah, we finally launched it.
Yeah, no, I played with like the first, like, I think the beginner levels, and and it was fantastic. Like I actually had a lot of fun actually playing with it because the nice thing about gamification in general is that your goal isn't just purely to learn. It's like, oh, can I, how do I get this whole thing done? It's an indirectly though, it's, the secondary goal you're learning, but your primary goal is just to have fun. And I think that's like one of the
Yeah.
things that, you see from like students in school and like just how people learn in general, like sports, for example. The techniques are pretty complicated and hard. But if your goal was like, how do I swing a bat, for like an hour, 10 hours a day, not going to be very fun. But if the goal is like, how do I compete with the team and like, play and have different scoring mechanics and like, how do I avoid getting like, out and all of that. So many things there that indirectly then make it fun. And then you happen to learn things aside and carrying that over into learning CSS, which, at the surface level, it's not the most fun thing in the world. Like learn essentially weird English like syntax that doesn't quite sound like English and have like weird characters. And yet you have to make it, look like something you're trying to visualize. It's a visual thing at the end of the day. So I think that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
So I'm curious to know, actually, you have all the infrastructure to basically provide both learn and also code golfing for CSS. Have you thought about going beyond it and actually adding JavaScript as well to it? Because, it's like almost seems in many ways a logical next step. It's like, yeah, you're the ultimate destination for front end battle, not just for CSS.
Yeah, actually. So fun fact, there's actually a site called csbattle.dev. And if you go there right now, it would just say it's coming soon. For now, just play CSS Battle. But yeah, it has been on our minds for long. As soon as like we just realized the potential of CSS Battle, within few months, we actually bought the domains SVG Battle and JS Battle because we finally want to dive into that. Uh, yeah, I mean, the only like tricky part here is like with CSS, it has been very clear that you write code to generate the images, to recreate those images. But for SVG, still like it's kind of straightforward. Like we would want you to write just SVG to create those images. But with
Yeah.
JS, it gets a little tricky because the community, first of all, like it's a little different compared to the UI developers and the CSS developers, designers who are the majority players on CSS Battle. JS developers don't generally tend to create visual stuff. They want to most probably like work on the functional aspects of JavaScript. So if
Yeah.
you want them to write JavaScript, they would ideally want to generate some outcome, which is not necessarily a visual thing, right? So that's where we are kind of like brainstorming. What could a fun target for a JS developer be, which they would like to achieve? So yeah, totally on a list. We want to get it sometime soon. But yeah, let's see.
Nice, yeah. Because like, I can always imagine, like, maybe limited to canvas elements. You have a canvas element, and you basically write JavaScript to create visuals in many ways, and then you're like, where does WebGL fit into all of this, and all of that, which is a whole fun spot in its own way. No, that's cute. I'm glad that you own the domains for all these things because I'm always curious to know, like, when is the JS version of it coming out? Because I'm not a big CSS person. I use it as part of what I do, but for me, JavaScript is the one I'm really like always excited about and and interested in. So like I can't wait for JS Battle one day to come out so I can use that and spend a lot of hours like building with like character optimization and APIs and so on.
Right. I just signed up you for the alpha version of JS Battle. You're gonna get a
Perfect. Yeah.
notification.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm excited. Can't wait. So, and now I want to shift a little bit, just talk a little bit more about just, your approach for designing and building, items. And so you have a pro plan. So tell me more about how you decided to, determine the pricing for your pro plan and what features will be available for pro users that won't be available for the free users.
We don't like exactly have a guideline to figure out like what we want to distribute in which plan. It has mostly been like first of all things which really cost us too much to like have it out there. For example, we use Firebase as a backend. That's the only thing that right now costs us in terms of our tech stack. So few things tend to take up a majority part of our costing, and few features. Basically, what I'm talking about is they contribute a lot to the cost. So we try to like provide as much as possible in the free plan, but then if you find that some feature uh, is taking a lot of like majority of our cost, and also it is just a luxury, it should not be like something we keep in mind always. It should not be critical to the game aspect. It should not be required to play the game. Otherwise, like we always tend to keep it in free. So if it's not that, if it's just a luxury, probably a helpful thing that makes the player's life a little bit easier, we tend to put it in the pro plan. And even the pricing, like I don't think like we have experimented a lot with it. We just like came up with an initial number, and we have stuck to that for like ever since pro plan came in.
Nice. Yeah, because like in many pricing models, often a case of like, what is the if we didn't have the solution, how much would people pay someone else essentially to solve this, or what would be a traditional method for solving this? In this case, it's more of a game. And so it's like, okay,
Mm.
given that people enjoy playing this, what is the amount they're willing to pay for that enjoyment? I think in some ways.
Yeah, that's what makes it very difficult too. Like it's a game, first of all. It's for a niche community of developers. And when is like the last developer-based game that you saw where people would pay money just for enjoyment, like you said? But yeah, that's a challenge that we like love solving, giving that extra or something to the players which they would like to pay for and make their life more enjoyable in CSS Battle.
Yeah. Nice. And you mentioned a little bit of your tech stack, it's built on Firebase, but let's talk about the design side of it as well. You mentioned you're a developer, but there's definitely a very strong design aesthetic to the entire site. It has a very bold color scheme that, it's very opinionated, very nice use of iconography, and there are transitions when you hover over things. It's definitely thoughtfully designed. So there's definitely a design element to it. And so are you the designer behind all of this, or, is the other Kushagra the designer?
Oh yes, it's the other Kushagra. Like all the design that you see, the lovely user experience, that's all designed by Kushagra. So he's a professional designer. He designed it like from end to end.
Yeah, it's very nicely done. Like I even went to like I remember when it first launched, it always had like this black and gray theme, which is very nice. And I think the accent colors have changed over the years. I think it was like red at some point. It was like then that was the yellow, which I think is really cool. And so yeah, no, I always found that to be one thing that differentiates it because when you look across at this day, across all websites, for the most part, they all have this bland look. It's like they took a templatized color scheme or use a color generator and be like, let's make it be these four colors everywhere. It's so rare to see something actually have a very unique kind of an experience there. And especially the dark color is great because the focus is on the visuals that people are creating, just like a traditional design tool where you want to have, most of the focus be on the artboard. I think this actually suits it very, very nicely in terms of what you all have built.
That's something we like decided early on. We are going to go by default dark mode because like I liked it, he likes it, and that was like a quite obvious choice. So, yeah.
Nice. No, that's actually, yeah. No, I always liked that very unique look. It always reminded me of like the more interesting creative things people did many, many years ago, back when there wasn't this idea of like everything must look like this particular design system or this particular style or make it look like this on a mobile device and so on. Speaking of mobile
Yes.
devices, by the way, do you see a lot of people using CSS Battle on a mobile device, or is it still very much a desktop big screen experience?
We do support mobile, like it's responsive. You can still code, but like we find that like 95% or so people use it on desktop.
Yeah, no, that it makes sense in many ways. And also one thing I've been curious about is you've probably seen like this rise of like code assistants, like GitHub Copilot, for example, where a computer basically generates all these things for you. Do you ever anticipate a computer one day, like being able to see a visual of what needs to be done in CSS, and then going backwards, it's actually generating all this for you?
Oh yeah, I have like actually thought of creating this something like this myself. I wanted to like write something like a Chrome extension, which you can just like enable, click off a button, it gets you the code in the editor in CSS Battle to create that levels image. Uh, I think that's possible. Even now, you can actually detect what shapes are there because we don't like mostly have complex shapes, even though few targets do. But then there are a lot of targets which have simple shapes overlapped on each other. So I think it should be like possible to detect that and have something that writes code for you, at least get you a base version that gives you more or less the approximate shapes with same colors and all those things, then of course like few tweaks here and there, and like you should be able to get 100% match. That should be interesting to see.
Yeah, that'll be pretty cool to think about, the future of this might hold. Well, I think we covered a lot of ground here, everything from like how it got started to what makes it interesting and so on. And so, I don't want to keep you for too long here beyond it, but my last question for you really is, where do you see yourself 5 years from now in terms of CSS Battle? I think you talked a little bit about SVG Battle and JS Battle, but, is there anything, you see yourself like looking at CSS Battle and saying that, here's something that's going to really need to do at some point to be like the thing that really matches what my expectations were?
Hmm. Yeah, like from time to time we like actually like brainstorm on where we want to see CSS Battle down the line. And like I already mentioned, CSS Battle is something we want to be one stop to have like to learn CSS, to read about it, to practice it, to understand it, to probably even use it for your production level work. Maybe you, for example, like just I want to store my CSS snippets or tokens or whatever. So we want it to be a central place where people can just like land up and have fun with CSS. That's what the motive is. And there are a few like things planned for the short term, for the long term. Uh, like one thing, for example, uh, we right now the game aspect very critically relies on code golfing, which is not something everyone finds interesting. You need to have that sort of perspective or like mindset to actually code golf a lot and get on top of the leaderboard, which is with time getting a lot difficult with so many players, amazing players coming in. So what we want to bring in CSS Battle is one-to-one gaming, one-to-one battles, where just like usual games you have on mobile or desktops, you can just like pass on a link to your friend, or maybe just play with a random player or out there on the internet. And it doesn't have to be actually golfing. It could be a timeout battle where the quickest one to get 100% match wins. Right? It could be as simple as that, because we think like that will unlock our gamification, the whole fun aspect to a lot of players out there. Even those who don't want to code golf, who don't want to get into that aspect, they just want to write plain CSS, actual readable CSS to get it like 100% match. They would have a lot of fun with these kind of features. So yeah, these are something like we have in a plan for short term, but eventually, as I said, like one stop for CSS.
Because I feel like it's, every now and then, like some people that follow on YouTube, you see this battle, like, compete with like, their best friend and they record the whole thing, and so on. I can totally imagine this takes on a whole new life of its own once you have it more officially supported, where I can see a lot more of these activities and maybe even have the option for that to be live streamed or recorded as well. So that way what they're playing can be, viewed by many people like a traditional, like, big game, like, what are the games that people play these days that are like huge, like League of Legends or something like that, I can totally imagine like a stadium of people just like, crowding in to see like this battle happening.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's something we have talked a lot of times. Like ideally, when apart from the code golfing aspect, these game features come in. We like actually imagine having on-site events where people, again, like you said, those games like Tekken and all, where there are like
Yeah.
two players, Street Fighters like games, where there are actually two players. You can see them fighting. You can see their
Yep.
lives, their progress bar. It's so fun to like actually seeing two players in front of you, which has been evident from the YouTube videos that people have put out there, like you mentioned. So yeah, that's something like we want to take to the next level, provided integrated into CSS Battle, where you one stop and you are in front of everyone
Yeah, that'd be
fighting.
so cool. Like, also imagine like you're at like some web developer conference and during lunchtime, instead of it just being like silence or whatever, just have like two people on stage like competing, and it's like projected across all the screens, and it's like a good intermission kind of an activity, and you can have people sign up for it, just like a traditional game back then when you actually went to like a computer like club or something, and you actually literally wrote your name down on like a list of numbers, and then just choose the ladder and everything from there. Like I think it'd actually be
Yeah.
a lot of really cool things there.
Exactly. Totally. Like we still like get so excited. Sometimes I just want to stop working on whatever I am. I just get on to it and implement it. It's so exciting in our minds.
Nice, nice. Well, I think with that, I just want to thank you so much for, just chatting about this battle, and also for creating it as well. It's a lot of fun to just see people using it and doing all the great things. So yeah, so thank you so much. And, we'll catch up again when JS Battle comes out. We should do this one more time.
Sure thing. Thanks for inviting me. Really had fun talking about CSS Battle, which is very close to my heart. Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you.
Right. Talk to you later.
See ya. Bye bye.